dispute between Turkey and the US, it is safe to argue that Turkey in most times was harbored in the Western bloc. And also please do not forget that Turkey still today is a legal member of NATO. The demarcation of our workshop today is after Soviet and Sonrası, but I would say that the change of Cold War world order started earlier than 1990. Not to say that in the late 1950s we can find that China-Soviet relationship soured and finally deteriorated. In the early 1970s, China-US rapprochement is an important turning point, I would say. And also, to this background, in 1971, China and Turkey also established the official relationship. And the year 1980 or 1978 to 79 is the year that the world changed. We can witness the Iranian Islamic Revolution, open reform policy by the Chinese government, invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union, and then in early 1980s, under the rule of Turk Dünyası, Turkey also started a new period of opening policy towards globalization. And China and Turkey both said to start their opening their doors to the globalization process almost at the same time. But this globalization for both Turkey and China is not an internal technology-driven development, by which I mean Turkey and China are not leading countries in terms of modern economic development at that time. Rather, it is very coincidental with the timing of traditional, at that time already outdated industry transferring from the developed countries to the underdeveloped world, especially to those places of the stable political development, environment having an open attitude toward the world market system and with the rich human resources. By all of this, it means that there were much lower level of salary for employment. And despite all of this, Turkey and China both benefited a lot from this process. The result of this development is the following: the need for more natural resources from the undeveloped world, the need of more investment technology from the developed world. Today, maybe more investment from China and the Belt and Road Initiative. The need of more market to sell their products, particularly in the more populous areas and inside the country. In Turkey, in particular, is the rise of a new middle class, economically and politically both, who benefit from the open and adaptive policies by 1980s Turkey to the globalization process. I would say these have fundamentally changed both the domestic and foreign policies for Turkey so far. What affects the foreign strategic choice of Turkey is a common effect of both external and internal factors. If the end of Cold War and the joining of the new wave of globalization are the main defining framework of the shifting and rebalancing of Turkish foreign policy, internally, I think the factor is the change of social classes in the Marxist sense, especially the ruling elite change of Turkey. These new ruling elites do not completely change the orbit of Turkish foreign policy, but the rebalancing of power and the change of political discourse are still very dramatic. Starting from the 1980s, Turkey has undergone significant changes in its internal affairs. The newly born generation of middle class from the globalization process had made traditional Kemalist political elites fall into a subordinate position in Turkey. Turk Dünyası supporters include the Anatolian petty bourgeoisie in the Marxist sense, as well as conservative political and social groups. Also, during this period, by now, Turkey gradually changed some of the aspects of state-imposed stance like political secularism policies. The ideology in the Turk Dünyası area of Turkey is technological westernization plus Turkism plus Islamism. Or in Turkish word is Turk Islam synthesis, or Turkish Islam synthesis. That is what the new era of post-Cold War had produced for Turkey. And I can say that it continued till today. And being reflected in foreign policy discourse, also since late 1980s, Turkey could be said to have been using a more pan-Turkist and pan-Islamist discourses. In other words, it is during the Turgut Özal era that Turkey started to have a heavier emphasis on the revival of the discourses colored by her Ottoman Turkic and Islamic cultural past and its heritages. Of course, in reality, it is also the same Turgut Özal that also stuck to the economic and political liberalism at the same time in order to promote the so-called modernization of Turkey. So, in sum, I would like to argue that the 1980 to 1990s era is a period of transformation from the Kemalist era to a post-Kemalist era in Turkey. The Turgut Özal era could be said to be a transitional period of this change from the perspective of history, and this process was already basically materialized after the AK Party came to power in 2002. In terms of the choice of its foreign policy discourse, we can find that Turkey has shifted from the emphasis on embracing the Muslim or the contemporary Western civilization to the emphasis on her Islamic Ottoman identity, on the reconstruction of political and cultural subjectivity of this Turkish nation. The collapse of the Soviet Union accelerated this process. More closer relationship with the Turkic-speaking world or the Turkic-speaking countries, and more emphasis on the closer ties with the Arab countries in the Middle East could be found during the Turgut Özal era also. There are heavy economic considerations in this process, but at the same time, it is also a reflection of the aforementioned global changes. In addition, in terms of changes in the external situation of Turkey, the end of Cold War and the changing of Western's attitude toward Turkey had very great impacts toward contemporary Turkish foreign policies. The end of Cold War meant that Turkey is less useful to the European security and is no longer a frontier country to the Western camp. But Turkey that has not really entered in the European club has to face the problem of adjusting or readjusting her orientation of the foreign policy and the issues of rebuilding Turkey's subjectivity and identity in terms of the new era national psychology. On the issue of Turkey's joining into the EU club, the Europeans deliberately have made all of these processes and things more complicated and more difficult, purposely to refuse to give Turkey a full membership in the EU, which greatly stimulated a backlash sentiment of Turkish nationalism. For example, in 2004, the EU accepted the Cyprus, which angered the AK Party and the Turkish people at that time. These are also the courses of Turkey's determination to strengthen its relationship with Muslim countries in the Middle East. Taking the theme of today's workshop in terms of the Turkic-speaking world, the collapse of the Soviet Union provided a better opportunity for Turkey to extend its influence to the Central Asia, especially the Turkic-speaking countries. But in this field, what Turkey has more is also on the soft power. It is argued that Turkey is a country with considerable capacity to achieve changes through soft power at the regional and global levels. Its contribution will include good governance, establishment of democratic government, economic development, and development of civil society. Different from many developing countries in the world, particularly including China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia, Turkey seems particularly important and effective from the perspective of soft power. Turkey's developing influence in Central Asia, especially those Turkic-speaking countries, including the historical ties in race, language, culture, religion, all of these are widely used during the process of Turkey's approaching to the Central Asia Turkic-speaking countries. To add something more is that in Central Asia, for example, in early 1990s, Turkey is set as an attractive model in the market system and the development of democracy. Turkey's closer relationship with the Middle East countries, Russia, Central Asia, Africa, and China, both in terms of international relationship, trade, and discourse change, has worried some Western observers since 2005 as early, who were provoking to say that Turkey will leave the Western camp for the East or return to the East in the Islamic world. But these people who were accustomed to a Turkey that bowed before the superiority of the Western powers, they cannot accept a Turkey that thinks highly of both East and the West. For me, this is a very Western-centric observation. As an important regional power like in Turkey, which is used to be described as a Kıbrıs or great country, as used to be, it is reasonable and understandable that since the late 1980s, especially after 1990, to seek a new national identity and a multi-dimensional foreign policy in the new historical period and to do her readjustment according to the new global reality. To date, Turkish foreign policy is more sophisticated and pragmatical, and it is rooted in the consideration of Turkey's immediate national interests and the globally changed world order, rather than simply ideological driven motivations or considerations. Thank you for your attention.
And now questions part.